Okay, the purpose of this assignment is for us to get familiar with a new concept in the Oracle Database 12c, which is the introduction of multi-tenant architecture. So what we're going to do today is walk through how we create what's called a pluggable database. So what I have up here on the screen is the Oracle database documentation for 12c, and you can see that I'm in the introduction to the multi-tenant architecture section of the documentation. And I would encourage you to read through this because it has a great explanation of what multi-tenant architecture is about and really how it works. And to briefly summarize, essentially every database at this point in the 12c architecture can be what's called a CDB or a container database, which is sort of the base of the or root of the database. And then you can have pluggable databases, which essentially are, for all intents and purposes, virtual databases that can be transported across various instances of the Oracle 12c database, either on the same machine or on different physical machines. So in the description here, they basically say that the pluggable databases are a collection of schemas, schema objects, and non-schema objects that appear as a database to the Oracle Net client. So as I said, I would encourage you to go down through and read this documentation to get a better understanding of what the multi-tenant architecture is and how it works. But as we can see in this diagram here, the basic concept is we can have what's called a pluggable database, and it can be plugged in or unplugged from various container databases. And that's really what we're going to walk through today so that we can get a better understanding of how this works. So what I'm going to do is I am going to switch over to the VM that we have created as a part of some of our earlier extra credit exercises. And we're going to start with just taking a look at what already exists here. So if I navigate to my current database instance, which I did create as a container database, we can see I'm down here in the Aura data file, and we can see that we have one set of data files for the ORCL SID or instance of a database here. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new database, and then we're going to explore how we go about creating and moving pluggable databases around. So what I'm going to do here is make sure that my environment variables are set by using the .oraenv, and then I'm going to call the database configuration assistant by typing dbca and hitting enter, and that's going to fire up an instance of the configuration assistant that will actually allow us to create an entirely new database. So it's possible to create as many databases as you'd like to on a database server. And I'm actually going to select the advanced mode because I want to specify a couple things specific to file locations to make my life easier. We'll just go with a general purpose database. I'm going to name this extra credit. I've given it this arbitrary domain name. You could make this whatever you wanted. The SID is going to be extra credit. We're going to create this as a container database. We will create one pluggable database called PDB extra credit. We're just going to go with the defaults through here. We're going to use the same passwords across the various administration users that you can see specified here. We'll go ahead and just utilize this default listener that is being used for our original database. Then on the file system options, we're actually going to use this common location for all database files. We're just going to put it under this extra credit directory, and that'll just make our lives easy. Then we'll let all the defaults apply for the rest of this. And then we already have the sample schemas on our originating database. You're certainly welcome to put these in if you want to, but I'm not going to choose to in this particular case. Let all the defaults apply here again. The only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to use the Unicode character set. Default here, dedicated server. And we're going to go ahead and hit next. Then actually I have the option here where I could create a database template that could be used for future creations. Or if I wanted, I could create a set of scripts that could be used to generate future databases, and this really speaks to the possibility of automation. If you remember how we created a database inside of Amazon Web Services, this is really most likely the basis of how they've gone about automating this, is they have a number of scripts where they're feeding parameters into those scripts that create databases on the fly for their users. But for our purposes, we're just going to create a database, and now it's created this output where it essentially tells us all the things that it's going to do, where it's going to create all of our files. And we're going to go ahead and click finish and let this database creation happen. Now this will take a few minutes. And essentially it's going to, inside of our existing U01 directory, it's going to create another instance of a database which is completely separate from the original database that we created. So this database will be startable and stoppable separately from the original database that we created, and for all intents and purposes we can view this as a database that could live on another server somewhere. But for the sake of ease for us and what we're trying to do today, we're just going to create it on the same server so that when we get to moving files around and whatnot, it's pretty easy to do. So I'm going to go ahead and wait while this gets created, and then we'll pick up on the other side of this creation process. Okay, we can see that the database configuration assistant has finished. It has created our database for us. We can see our global database name here, our system identifier, where the parameter file is, the URL for the enterprise manager. And we're going to go ahead and just click close here now and go back and take a look at what has changed since the last time we were in our directory. So we can see that we are still in the Aura data directory, and now if we do a list, we're going to see now that there is this extra credit directory for data files that is created as a part of our process. And if we switch to this directory and take a look at what's inside of it, a couple layers deep here, we see all of the data files that have been created as a part of the creation of this database. We can also see the PDB seed container database that's been created, and then also the PDB extra credit container database which we specified to be created, and we can actually drill down into those directories as well. And if we take a look at what's inside of that, we'll see that this also has a set of data files associated with it that are sort of the data files we would expect to see. We have a system, a sysaux, and a users data file, and these will all be associated with various table spaces as well. So now that we see that the configuration assistant has actually created these separate objects inside of our database directory structure, we can actually go out and begin to interact with this new database and create some new container databases utilizing SQL Developer. So the database configuration assistant should have started up our database, and you see I've already got a connection set up for our extra credit database. I'm using my sys password, and then we saw that the SID was extra credit. We should be able to test this connection. We can see that it's a success. So we can actually jump in and begin to interact with this database instance. So I have a couple of script files which I'm going to provide to you guys as a part of this assignment, and you can use these to do what you need to do. And I'm starting out here in this container scripts, and I'm going to go ahead and say let's connect to that extra credit database that we just created. And I would like to take a look at the table spaces and the file locations for our extra credit container database. So you can see here that we can see all of the table spaces, their associated data files, and the statuses of those. Now we can also take a look here and see what pluggable databases exist inside of this container, and as we would expect, we can see the seed container database that is a part of all of our container databases, and we can also see the PDB extra credit pluggable database that was also created. Now if we scroll down a little bit here, we've got a SQL statement that will actually pull the data files associated with those various pluggable databases that we've created, and these file paths will be helpful for us as we move along here. So next what we can do is we can actually go ahead and create a new pluggable database. And so I've got this create pluggable database statement here, and if you take a look at what's going on, we're saying create the pluggable database. We'd like to name this PDB new DB. We're specifying an admin user as this PDB new sys, and we're saying that the password will match the username, obviously not recommended in a production environment. And then we're also defining the roles that this particular user will have. So it will have the permission to connect to the database. We'll give it the dba credentials, which will allow it to do a lot of the management and administration tasks, and then we'll also give it resource, which allows it to do things more development centric, such as creating tables and procedures and that type of thing. And then you can see that we're saying that we would like to use the seed database files to create and convert those over to our new database that we're creating here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this particular statement, and it takes a few seconds to run, and what's going to happen is it's actually going to create us a new pluggable database that we can then use for as a database. And you'll see as we go along here that we can make additional copies of it, and we can move it around and change its name and associate its data files with different databases. Okay, so now we'll see that this pluggable database has been created, but we won't be able to interact with this database until we actually start it up. And the way you do that with a pluggable database is you actually alter its state, and we're going to say go ahead and open this pluggable database in read-write mode so we can do some stuff with it. So we go ahead and issue that command. You can see that this database has been opened. We didn't run into any errors here. And now what we want to do is we actually want to create a table inside of this and some table spaces. So if we scroll back up here and we take a look at our pluggable databases with their table spaces, you can see that we have our new pluggable database, this PDB new DB, and it has two data files that match our seed database. But you know what we're really missing here is we're missing this user table space right here and an associated file to go with it. So we could have copied our PDB extra credit one and had all of these things automatically, but we can also go in and create these objects ourselves. So over here you can see I've created a connection. We're just going to take a look at the properties. And we'll see here we have our username and password that we specified in our create script. The connections are all the same here. But the service name is actually equal to the database name, and then if we have a domain associated with it, it's also that also goes on the service name. So we know that we created this iamanerd.com domain here. And so we ought to be able to test this. It's the pluggable database name plus the domain that goes with the global database instance. If we test this, we can see that we got a success here, and we can save our connection. And then I'm just going to go ahead over here in our create table SQL, I'm going to go ahead and say let's connect to our new pluggable database instance. You can see that we've done that. And now we're going to go ahead and create the user table space, and we're going to specify a data file to go with it. And now you can see that we've got this UO1 app Oracle Oradata extra credit. Now I think when we actually created our database, we ended up with this being nested down 2 levels. So we're going to go ahead and keep with that nesting philosophy. If you will. So we'll just type in this extra credit one more time. And there's nothing really particularly necessary about this. It's just kind of sticking with what happened while we created our database. So I'm going to go ahead and issue the command to create this new table space inside of our new container database. So we'll kick that command off. We can see that the table space has been created. And now if we went back to our container database and we ran this SQL statement one more time, we can see that this user's table space has been created for our new pluggable database, and we can see the location of that associated data file right here. And it actually ended up exactly where we wanted to put it. So now I'm going to grant this user the ability to use this table space by just making sure that the user is granted this by issuing this alter user command. And now I'm actually going to create a new table here called my proof, and this table is actually going to be what we use as the basis of our assignment submission. And you'll see as we move this pluggable database around that this object will go with us, and we're going to collect some information about its various homes at certain points in time so that we can see that we've actually been moving this around as we have expected to. So I'm going to go ahead and create this table by issuing this command. We can see that it was created. Now I'm actually going to do an insert, and I want to be very careful to make sure I commit this as well so that this transaction is saved. I'm going to just highlight these two things and issue them as a script. We can see that we've inserted one row and that insert has been committed to the database. And now if I do a select off of this table, we can see that we have inserted the name of our container database, the name of our pluggable database, the username associated with it, the service that we're actually connected to on the listener, the host machine, which in my case I have given it this name. Yours might still be named localhost or something else. And then we've also recorded the timestamp here of when this row was inserted. So, okay, that's great. We have created our table in our new pluggable database, and now we're going to come back over here to our container script file, and we're actually going to do some additional operations here. So if we want to copy or move this around or unplug it or anything like that, the first thing we need to do to our new database is issue this close command so that we put it in a state where it's actually allowed to be operated on for the next things that we're going to do. So you can see that I've gone ahead and closed the database without an error here. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to unplug this database. And you can see that I've got an alter command here that unplugs the database. And then when you unplug a database, it actually writes a bunch of stuff out about this database to an XML file. Now, as we recall here, we had this nested extra credit directory, so we'll just go ahead and add that in here. And we're going to unplug this database into this unplug db.xml file. So I'm going to go ahead and issue this command. It'll just take a second. And really what this is doing is it's removing this database from the container. And if we come back up here and issue this select statement again, we can see that the database still exists, right? But if we were to scroll up here and check on its state, we would see that it's been moved into this mounted state, which means that it's there, it's available, the files all exist, but it's not plugged into our container. So there wouldn't be any way for us to interact with this database at this point because it's not open in a mode that can be addressed from a client tool such as SQL Developer. So now we're going to scroll down here, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to say, hey, let's get rid of this pluggable database, but I don't want you to delete the data files. We plan to reuse those. So I'm going to go ahead and issue a drop command on our pluggable database, and that just takes a second. When we come back up here and we do another select, we're going to see that this pluggable database no longer exists in our system. If we look at the pluggable databases here, you'll see that it's no longer there. But what's interesting, if we were to switch back to one of our command windows here, we can actually still do a list command, and we'll jump up just a couple levels here. And we can see that inside of our extra credit container database, this PDB new database directory still exists. And if we take a look at this directory, we can see that all of the data files actually still exist, and we can actually see our unplug db.xml. Now, the only way we can access this pluggable database at this point is really through the operating system. The container database no longer acknowledges the existence of these files because we've dropped this pluggable database. But we can see that as commanded, we've kept the data files, and we can actually reuse them. One of the other interesting things you can do is you can actually open this XML file that's generated as a part of the unplug process and take a look at what's in here. And we can see it's just a number of parameters that are related to that pluggable database. Some of the important ones being the location of the system data files and then the other data files associated with this instance. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a new pluggable database reusing the data files that we had associated with the pluggable database we just deleted. So as we recall, we have this nested directory structure here, And what we're going to do is to say, hey, let's create a new pluggable database, new db2 here. We're going to reuse the data files associated with the database that we just dropped. So we're essentially going to say, hey, go ahead, create a new pluggable database and use the data files that we've got sitting around that really don't have any use at the moment. So here I'm going to issue this command that create our new pluggable database. You can see it was created and pretty quickly because it didn't have to go through the process of creating any of the system files or anything like that. And now we can actually open this database to be interacted with, and we'll see here pretty quickly that we have moved around what was the old database into a new pluggable database. So I have this connection over here. We'll go ahead and take a look at these properties. We can see there's a new service name here which should match the name of our new pluggable database. I'm going to go ahead and drop that domain name in that we know is a part of the service, and we can test this connection. It still has the same system user, which would be in the system files and password. So if we test this connection, we can see that it's successful. Now if we come over to our create table script that we got here, I'm actually going to switch to this second connection, and I wasn't happy about that. I think that's just an idiosyncrasy related to SQL Developer. So what SQL Developer is going to want is just us to get rid of that old connection. I think that's what it's holding on to. So now I should be able to come over here and, oh, actually I know what I did. If we take a look at the properties here, I didn't actually save our domain. So iamnerd.com. We will save this, we will test it one more time, and then we can see we're good. I'm going to go ahead and select that connection. And now if we scroll down here and we do a select from our My Proof table, we can see that it has that row that we inserted from the old database. But now what's going to be interesting is what happens when we insert another row into this table. So I'm going to run the insert and commit commands, and we'll do a select from this table one more time. And now we can see that we are in the same container database. We actually have a new instance of a pluggable database here. It has the same username, but it is using a different service to connect via the listener. We can see that the host name obviously hasn't changed, and then obviously the timestamp is specific to now. So okay, that's all well and good. Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to close this database down, our PDB2, by issuing this close immediate command. And we're going to actually unplug this database as well so we can make a clone of it. So acknowledging our nested directory structure here, I'm going to say go ahead and unplug this second database into this unplug db2 XML file. So I'm going to go ahead and issue this command. Alright, we can see that this this database has been unplugged here without error. If we were to jump back to our directory here, we'll see that the unplugged db2 XML file exists now. And if I open that up, you can see that the parameters inside this show us our new pluggable database name. we see that the data files are the same data files that we were using before in the same location, and nothing else has really changed about those. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a clone of this pluggable database. So as before, where we deleted the pluggable database and then it was no longer usable, we're actually going to create a copy of this database. So we will have our original database that we were able to connect to, and we'll have a clone of that database as well, which is its own pluggable database. So we're going to go ahead and issue a create command for pdb new db3, and we know we have our nested directory structure here, and we'll need to do this obviously in these other file paths here. Now one additional thing we see here new is we're actually going to be creating a new directory for this new set of data files, these copy data files, and we actually need to create this directory on the operating system so that the database can use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump back over to our editor window here and just take a look at where we are. We're going to jump up one level, and we're actually going to make the directory that we need here for our new pluggable database. So the way we make a directory is just that mkdir for make directory, and we're going to call this pdb new database or new db3. Go ahead and issue that command. Now if we do a list, you can see that we have the directory sitting in the place that we want it to be. There isn't currently anything inside of that directory. We can just double check that quickly. We do a list command. See, there's nothing inside of here. So now we'll come back to our SQL developer window here, and we're actually going to issue the command to create a new pluggable database as a clone of this existing pluggable database, which is all specified in this unplugged db2.xml file that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and issue this command, and you can see that it's unhappy with us here because I've messed this file path up. So just take that extra slash out of there because it can't find what it's looking for. We'll try this one more time. So now our script is running here. It's creating our new pluggable database. It is making a copy of the various database data files. And what we'll see when we're all done here is we have an actual copy of our pdb new db2 database. So we can see the database has been created, and now we can actually open this database for read-write purposes. And now when we jump back over to our create table script here, I have a connection created for this new 3, same username again, different service name reflecting our new pluggable database. We can test this and make sure we save it. And now if I come down here and switch our connection to the pdb new db3, we do a select. We see that we have the 2 rows that have been inserted as we've kind of bounced this around to various pluggable databases. And now if we issue this insert command one more time and we run a select, we can see the third row inserted into our table shows that we have our third pluggable database with the same user and host and obvious increment of the timestamp. Now, back over here, we can actually plug our PDB new DB2 database back in and open it up to be used as well. Okay, so if we wanted to plug the PDB new DB2 database back in, interestingly enough, this is kind of strange. The only thing you can do to a unplugged database in the same instance is actually drop it. So if we take a look here, we can just go ahead and say, hey, drop this pluggable database, new DB2, but we want to keep the data files. And that's a pretty quick operation. And then we can just recreate it, and this time we will actually point it at the file we used for unplugging it. So go ahead and create our pluggable database again, or plug it back in, if you will. And now we should be able to open this in a read-write state by issuing this command. And now if we jump back over here to our create table script, this is where we can really see what's physically going on with the clone. So we're still connected to our new DB3. I'm going to reissue this select from my proof table. But now if we connect back to our new DB2, and if we issue this select on this instance again, we can see that our my proof table is in the state it was before we cloned it over to the PDB new DB3. So in 2, it has the 2 rows it had in it before we cloned it. When we take a look at 3 and we issue the select command, it has the 3 rows in it. So completely separate objects on the database now. And if we were to jump over and take a look in our editor here, we would see that the new DB3 directory has the tablespace data files in it that we cloned over from DB2, which still exists in this PDB new DB directory. So that's the gist of how to move these files around. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a clone of this pluggable database inside of our original database instance, this orcl instance. So what we're going to do in order to do that is we're actually going to come back over and we are going to close our new DB3. So go ahead and issue the command to close it. And then we are going to actually create a directory under the data files of our orcl database instance for this new DB4. So we're going to do that quick using this make dir command. Come back to our editor window and just drop that in there. And now if we jump up a couple of directories here, and we drill down into our orcl, we can see that we have this PDB new DB4, and if we jump into this directory, we can see it doesn't have any files in it. So first thing we need to do is we need to actually unplug our new DB3. So the way we just need to go ahead and grab that that unplug command. So let's grab that from up here. we can put that right there. We're going to change this to the unplug3 XML. We'll go ahead and put it into the directory that the rest of our data files live in. So we know we've already closed this database. We'll go ahead and unplug this database. Oh, I guess we didn't close it, sorry. We'll go ahead and close this database. And then we will, oh, sorry, didn't change the name of the database we're referring to here. Go ahead and unplug this database into that XML file. Alright, so that's completed, and now we're going to create this new DB4 as a clone. We are in this nested directory structure, but there's something very important that we have to realize before we issue this command here. And let me just change these file paths before I tell you what that is. And so you can see right here we're still connected to our original instance. So if we were to create this new pluggable database, we'd be creating it in our original instance. We actually want to create this in our Oracle database instance. So I'm going to switch to that connection here. And now I'm going to go ahead and issue the command which says to create this new database 4 as a clone. We're going to use the unplug XML file that we just created in this directory, and we are going to convert all of those files using a copy from where they sit now into this new directory that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and issue this command. Now we know because we have unplugged the new DB3, if we were to open that again, we would need to go ahead and drop that database and then create a new instance of it in our original instance, and we'll do that. But let's take a quick look here. Oops. We're going to go ahead and open this pluggable database in read-write mode, so we can make that same insert that we've done in all of our other ones. And now you can see if I come over here and take a look at this connection, same user, we have a different service. Once again, we should be able to go ahead and test this. We can see that was a success. And now if we come over to our create table and we switch to this DB4, if we make a select off of this table, we'll see the original 3 rows that we put in here. But now if we go ahead and do an insert, and we do a select off of our table one more time, we can see that we've actually created a row here that reflects the fact that our new DB4 instance is in a different container database. And so to sort of prove out that what we thought happened in that we created a clone of this, we can actually come back here and drop this pluggable database that we had unplugged. So let's just go ahead and do that quickly. Just copy this command from up here. Make sure to change the pluggable database that we're referring to. We're going to keep the data files. It's really the only option available to us at this point. Okay. Oh, and this says it doesn't exist because we're still connected to the Oracle instance. I'm going to switch back to the extra credit instance, which actually contains this database. I'm going to issue that command. It's gone ahead and dropped it. And so now we can just reissue this pluggable database command here. So we actually don't want to use the copy method. We want to use the no copy method. So if we scroll up here to our scroll up and grab the copy method that we use to create our second database. And we are really just plugging our new DB3 back in. So we're going to point it at our new DB3 directory and the XML file that we used. And now we can issue the command to plug this database back into our container, which it has done. And then we can also open this. Sorry, wrong command. We can open this database so that we can read and write. And now if we just close this connection down to make sure that SQL developer doesn't get mad at us, come back over to our create table. If we select our new DB3 connection and do a select from the table, we can see the original 3 rows before we copy this over. We can see that it still exists in its original container. Now if we switch back to our new DB4 and issue this command, we can see that we have all 4 rows. So at this point, that's all I wanted you to be able to do. Hopefully this has given you a much better understanding of what a container database is and what a pluggable database is, and really how you can move these around. For credit on this assignment, what I'm going to want you to do is actually give me a printout of what's in this my proof table at the very end of your creating this last pluggable database. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to jump into the connection that I've created for the last container database. Take a look at the tables in here. We should just see this one my proof table, and what I want you to do is just double click on that table and it should open this up in a window inside of here. And if we click on the data column, we should be able to see all the rows that we've inserted in this as we've gone along. So go ahead and shrink the left hand side down here so we can see all the values in this table. And what I want you to do is just go ahead and take a snapshot or a screen print of this view right here. And if you've successfully created your container databases in all the right places, we should see a set of 4 rows that looks pretty similar to this set.